Welcome back. Your timeout is 6:14 on this Friday. Whether you like it or not, the city of Austin is home to many of the rich and famous.
That's right. We are a destination city for Hollywood elites, business tycoons, and others. Joining us today is the skunk at the garden party, Adam Andrzejewski, CEO of OpenTheBooks.com. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Ellison, JC.
Adam, you tracked pandemic aid into companies owned by our most famous people this morning.
Well, Austin has a lot of famous people. I think they like your city slogan, Keep Austin Weird, because there's certainly a lot of them. I'm from a small town. There's two famous people, and I'm actually one of them, and I'm not famous. So, look, we Googled famous people in Austin, Texas. We ran their companies through our federal databases, and here's what we found. So we found folks like Sandra Bullock. She owns a film production company, Fortis Films. She took a forgiven $55,000 Paycheck Protection Program loan. This was a program designed at the peak of the pandemic to help mom and pop businesses on Main Street. And Sandra Bullock's company, you know, they were forgiven on $55,000. We found Jensen Ackles. He's the Supernatural star. He's co-owns with his family, the family business beer company out in Dripping Springs over there. And they took about $108,000 on a forgiven loan. You got Lance Armstrong in town. So he's worth about $50 million this year. You know, he's the 7-time winner of the Tour de France that was stripped after the doping scandal. But he was an early investor in Uber and is worth a lot of money. And he owns a company called Wegu, which is a marketing, biking, podcast, merchandising company. And he took $600,000 given PPP loans. Then you got Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan's a co-investor, co-founder of Onnit. It's sold in 2021 to Unilever, but not before they were forgiven on $2.4 million worth of paycheck protection loans.
So, Adam, let's talk about who didn't you find?
So thankfully, you know, I like Matthew McConaughey. I've read his New York Times best-selling book, Green Lights. It's a really good biography, autobiography, one of the best I've ever read. We couldn't find him in the database. And look, I try to find these people. I'd like to go on Joe Rogan's podcast and debate his $2.4 million worth of forgiven PPP loans at the height of the pandemic. You know, it's all legal, and but I'd like to debate the ethics of it. Rogan's worth $120 million. We did not find Haley Duff, the sister of Hillary Duff. You know, she's an entrepreneur. I looked really hard at her companies. We couldn't find them. Owen Wilson, I like his movies, Marley and Me and Wedding Crashers and Night at the Museum. And Owen Wilson, we couldn't find him in there. Or Elijah Wood from The Lord of the Rings. These are some of the people we just couldn't find.
Adam, outside of famous people, who were the rich people in Austin that cashed big on COVID aid checks?
We got one of the largest accounting firms in the country. It's called Maxwell Locke and Ritter. They describe themselves as one of the largest accounting firms. They disclosed that their revenues actually were $35 million in 2020 during the pandemic year, up 8%, and they cashed a $2 million forgiven PPP loan. You got law firms like Scott Douglas and McConaughey, and they're one of the top law firms in the state of Texas, and they cashed forgiven PPP loans of $1.6 million. You got the 90-year-old Austin law firm, McGinnis Lockridge, cashed $1.5 million of forgiven PPP loans. You got the hospitals. You know, the hospitals took billions and millions locally, but for instance, like HCA, they paid it all back, and St. David's Healthcare, they paid it all back. St. David Healthcare, they paid it all back as well.
Adam, always great information you share with us this morning. I think a lot of people would be surprised. All those famous people who live in Austin.
Yeah.
Thank you for chatting with us this morning.
Thank you.
And you can find all of Adam's reports at OpenTheBooks.com.